see so many young people here who hopefully will pay attention to what I have to say. And so let me begin with my story. I was born in Germany in 1924. That was after the end of the First World War, which Germany lost, and an absolute monarchy came to an end. A democracy was established. Germany didn't have much experience with democracy. And times were very bad. First, there was great hunger after the war. Then there was a huge inflation. So bad that people were paid every day because next day their day's pay wouldn't afford anything. Times were really bad. And in all of this, a man came to the surface. He did, by the way, not create the party, but he came to the surface, named Hitler. And Hitler, from the beginning, laid out his policies. He was in jail for 6 months instead of a year, and in that time he wrote a book. He laid out his policies and his ideas what Germany should be, and of course the Jewish people were to blame for everything. The loss of the war, the hunger, the inflation, everything that happened was the fault of the Jews. I want you to know that the Jewish population in Germany was less than 1%. Okay, about 550,000 to 60 million people. Eventually, in the mid-20s, things were getting better. People started to work again or whatever. And then came the Great Depression. The same depression you had here in this country, where huge amounts of people were unemployed, where there was real hardship. The same was in Germany. Again, you could blame the Jews for that, right? I mean, how else could it have happened? And I remember as a child, beggars coming to the door, asking for some food if you could spare it. Not eating it right away, but going to the next apartment and asking again for a plate of food. And then they would take it home to feed their families. I remember open horse-drawn carts going through the street to collect clothes for those who didn't have any. I remember a lot of things. I remember also the street fights, the flag burnings, the shootings between the socialist parties and the right-wing Nazi party. We happened to live in the middle of town. Next to us was a socialist newspaper, and the havoc in the street was a daily occurrence. In 1933, Hitler was elected in a very democratic way. His party won the most votes, and he was elected, and this means he took power January 1st, 1933. By March of 1903, we had the first concentration camp. In the beginning, it was not so much directed against Jewish people, but against anyone who opposed his government. Socialists, communists, people claimed who opposed the party. April 1 saw a boycott against all Jewish businesses in Germany, and I remember that day very well because party members were put in front of our place, decals were put on the showcases, party members were put in front of the place, and all over town we saw signs, "Don't buy from the Jew." The Jew is responsible for everything bad that happened to us. Only go to Aryan stores. I remember that day very, very well. I was then 9 years old. It went on from there to worse. In 1935, there was a party congress in Nuremberg with tens of thousands of party members. New laws were put into place. Incidentally, between 1933 and 1935, all Jewish teachers, all civil servants were dismissed from their jobs. Okay? So we started to have unemployment among the Jewish people. 35 came the laws, anti-Semitic laws. Intermarriage could not take place. We were deprived of our citizenship and civil rights. We could no longer go to a movie, a theater, a museum. You name it, we were excluded. Okay? And by the way, a swimming pool or anything like that was off limits. By 1936, all Jewish students had to leave the schools, the public schools, and had to go to a Jewish school. In our city where I grew up, a Jewish school had to be established, and you know, for us kids, it was a good thing. And you are going to say, how could that have been a good thing if you go to a segregated school? Well, we were no longer exposed to the harassment, the beating, the constant discrimination that we endured in school as well as in the street. So, for us, going to Jewish school was a relief. It was meant to segregate us out of the schools, out of society. Finally, we could really settle down to learn something. And the teachers that were dismissed in 1933 now were teaching in the Jewish schools. Jewish businesses had to be sold. They were Aryanized. They were sold at a price, if you wish, that did not represent the value of the business or the inventory or anything like that. We, my mother, held out till the very end. In the very end, for Jewish businesses in Germany was December 31, 1938. But what happened between 36 and 38? Ever more restrictions. When the war broke out, our ration cards had less food on the tickets. Curfew in the evening, 8 o'clock, and not before 7 in the morning. We were ever more pushed together. Our lives became ever more restricted. Our telephones were taken away. Our radios were taken away. So the only thing you had was the newspaper. And the newspaper was worth nothing because it was all propaganda and distortions of the facts of what was going on. 1938. Jewish people who were born in Poland but had lived in Germany for many, many years were expelled. And among them was a couple whose son was in Paris studying. And when he found out about the expulsion of his parents and the whole group, he became very angry. He decided he was going to shoot the ambassador, the German ambassador in Paris, got a gun, went to the embassy, and while he couldn't find the ambassador, he found the young secretary, the young man. They shot him on November 7th, 1938. The young man died on November 9, and on November 10, the German government unleashed a pogrom against the Jewish people. Now, this had all been planned. They only waited for the occasion to do it. It did not involve the population. It involved the party members who were in civilian clothes and not in uniforms. This was done so the foreign press in Germany would say, well, the civilians rose up against the Jewish people. That was not so. It was the party that was ordered to do it. So all our synagogues were vandalized or burned. Businesses such they still existed were ruined. They were vandalized. Private apartments were ransacked. 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and taken to concentration camps. 100 died that day. These that they were beaten to death, committed suicide, or dropped dead of heart attacks. It was an awful, awful day, and I remember it well. It is not something you forget. 39, as I mentioned, the war broke out. Germany entered Poland, and things got worse, absolutely worse. In 1940 was the first deportation of Jewish people from a city in the north of Germany to Poland into a ghetto in Lublin. And in October 22nd, 1940, 6,504 people were arrested from the provinces of Baden, the Palatinate, and the Saar. One province is on the right side of the Rhine River, the others are on the left. I know you don't know much geography. This is strange to you. But take a map and look, okay? Ours was the only deportation ever to go west, and west meant into France. We had no idea when we were arrested by the party members and the police what was going to happen to us. We were not told where we were going to be taken, nothing. But we were told that we can take one suitcase as long as we can carry it. We were allowed to take 100 marks, which at that time was about $25. And we were allowed to take a blanket, knife, fork, spoon, what have you. And off we went. We had to sign a paper stating that whatever we owned, everything in our apartments, any money we might have had in the bank, was now the property of the German state. So we were left with nothing but a few things in a suitcase and 100 marks. Jewelry, stuff like that, we had to turn that in a long time ago. We could not keep anything beyond a wedding band and one set of silverware. Everything else had already been turned into the Germans. You didn't have a diamond anymore, you didn't have anything anymore, not even a candlestick. So we had already been diminished in everything. My family at that time consisted of my 91-and-a-half-year-old grandmother, paternal grandmother, my mother's 3 sisters, my mother and I. We all lived together because one rent was cheaper than paying 3. Remember, we no longer had an income. So we were taken to the railroad station in a police truck. Had a problem with my grandmother. She couldn't get up on the truck. And I tried very hard to get her up. The rises were very small. And then I looked to my right, And we were in the middle of the city, the main street. And a lot of people had gathered there watching this. And they were laughing. Laughing at a 91-year-old Jewish woman who had to get up on a police truck. Eventually, a policeman gave her a push and I got her up. We were taken to the railroad station. We made all our friends and acquaintances and whoever still lived in town. It was about 950 people. And put on a train by late afternoon. And off we went. We were on this deportation train, and we still had a passenger train, not cattle cross at that particular moment. We didn't know where we go. By late afternoon, the train pulled out, and to our astonishment, we were taken into France. We were 3 days on that train without food or water. My grandmother, being that old, the stress of having been taken out of her home, having to sit there, nothing to drink, nothing to eat, the poor woman lost her mind. Totally, completely. And you're maybe old enough to understand that once the Germans got off the train in France, at the demarcation line, because France was occupied by the Germans, it was divided in half. The north was under German command, the south was the Vichy government, very German Nazi friendly, but there was a demarcation line through France, and the Nazis got off at the demarcation line, and the train went on. And that moment, my mother found out there is still a Jewish doctor on the train, and he came and he looked at the situation with my grandmother. He gave me a number of sleeping pills. I managed to get them into my grandmother. She went to sleep. Unfortunately, she woke up. And so the poor woman, after 3 days on the train, she was taken off first because the condition she was in. 2 weeks later, we found her in the concentration camp to which we had been taken. Now, the concentration camp had one main road that was paved. On either side of the road were barracks, 25 to a block, surrounded by barbed wire, with a guard at the gate. Each block had a guard with a gun. And you don't know what someone will do when he has a gun in his hand. So it was frightening to us. And we were put in the barracks. They were about 75 feet long and 15 feet wide. About 70, 80 people to a barracks. There was nothing in there but the bare floor and doors at each end, 2 electric lights. That was it. So for you and for me at the time, I was 16, sleeping on the floor is not a hardship. Well, let's put it simply, you can do it, right? But what about the old people who have trouble getting down on the floor and getting up? It is nearly impossible for them. But they have to get up during the night. They have to go to the bathroom, right? And what was that like? Well, it was a little wooden structure, about 5-6 feet off the ground. It once upon a time had stalls with doors. The doors had been ripped off. The wood was used for something else. And a concrete floor and a hole in each stall with a pail underneath, or a drum really. That was it. Do not think of toilet paper. It didn't exist. Okay? Conditions were horrendous. In fact, here's the concentration camp we were in. Was the only camp in France that was considered a concentration camp. All others, 48 of them, were considered internment camps because their conditions were slightly better. There was, however, something, by the way, let me talk about food. Food? Forget it. Anything wrong? Food was something that looked like coffee in the morning. We got half a pound of bread for 24 hours. Lunchtime was a vegetable soup. It was water with some beets in it, the beets that you feed to animals, and occasionally a little morsel of meat. Same in the evening, or maybe just some tea. That was our food. So that many people died of starvation. France did not have extermination camps. You just died of starvation. And I know someone who won't. Diseases broke out. We lived with rats and mice and fleas and you name it, even bedbugs, because they live in the wood. We had everything. Life was extremely hard. The winters are cold and very rainy, and since nothing was paved, we sank into the mud. Halfway up your leg. Your shoes got many times stuck in the mud. As a matter of fact, the first person who died, to my knowledge, was a woman who went to the latrine during the night, got stuck in the mud, face down, could not extricate herself, and died. Now, it gives you an idea of the conditions in the camp, right? It was horrendous. No, France did not have death camps. We simply died of starvation or disease. Not everyone, but a lot and a lot of people. There was one plus, namely that some social service agencies could function, such as a Jewish child welfare organization, Catholic and Protestant organizations, the Quakers, and many others. The Swiss Red Cross. They all tried to make our lives just a little better. But what they also did, and they made a concerted effort to get all children, or as many as the parents would let go, to take them out of the camps, place them or else with families or group homes in order for them to have a more normal life. I myself was extremely lucky that my mother agreed to let me go, and I went with 6 other young people, teenagers all. We were taken to a village called Lichonbo. Lichonbo is a Huguenot village. Well, who are the Huguenots? They are Protestant fundamentalists. They know about persecution, and they teach their children from generation to generation the persecution they experienced in the 1500s by the French Catholic kings. So they are familiar with the story. And their ministers appealed to the community to do everything they can to resist the German government and their orders, and to do their utmost to help them. And he appealed to them to do it without pride and without hate. Lichtenberg, where I was from September 1941 to February 43, they had their moral compass right. We 7 were placed in a Swiss group home. It was not a luxurious place at all. But we had a bed, we had sheets, and we had better food, and we could go to school. I personally didn't. I didn't speak French. I first had to learn French. I was now 16 and a half, and I figured, well, they're going to put me in third grade till I speak French. And having missed so much school in Germany, I figured I will never be able to catch up. So I didn't go to school. I learned French in private lessons. It was okay. I managed, as you can see on here. There came the moment in 1942 where, number one, I was asked to come and see my mother in the camp because she had been very ill. And number two, when I came back, we had to go into hiding with the farmers. The first thing was my mother. I was told I could get into the camp, and when I got there, the camp was under lockdown. And I could not get in. I saw my mother from a great distance, a very shouted exchange of words. And the next morning, the same thing. And on the 6th of August, 1942, my mother was redeported together with 1,000 people. First to a place outside of Paris called Nancy, and from there, 2 days later, to Auschwitz. I saw my mother for about an hour at the freight yards, because now the people were putting cattle cars. 70, 80 people in a car. And freight cars in Europe are much shorter than the ones we have here. So people could just stand. Whatever luggage they had was in the car as well. The Quakers, these very good people, managed to hustle up some food and put some food in each car. It wasn't much, but it was something. No water. I talked to my mother for about an hour, and she told me point blank that she would never come back, that this would be her last train ride. My mother was a realist. She saw the situation, and she knew her own situation, being at this point a sick person. Eventually, the doors were shut and locked, the train moved out, and the last thing I saw of my mother was a little white handkerchief lying out of the train between the slats of the cattle car. I was the only civilian person present at this deportation. I was 17. I returned to the chambre. I had to tell my friends what happened. Said we no longer had any parents. Said all decisions we make have to be good ones. Otherwise, it won't be so very good for us. And within 2 weeks, roundups started. We were caught one night by the police. A Swiss gentleman who was in charge of the homes talked his way out of this situation. And finally the police said, well, tell you what, you keep them here. We will check in the morning with the authorities. whether you are right that we cannot touch the young people here in a Swiss home. And you keep them here. And they left. Well, nobody is so stupid as to keep them here. We were given something like breakfast. We were told where to go in the woods and hide. And by evening, the farmers came and picked us up and took us to their farms and hid us. The farmers, the whole population in that area, not just the villagers, but the whole population, listened very much to what their pastor had said. And they hid us, they took care of us, always at the risk of their own lives. Had we been found, this farmer, or all farmers, who had wives and children, would have been taken away and probably shot. So it takes a lot of moral courage and conviction to do what they did. We could return to the village after 4 weeks. By the way, 8 gendarmes, 8 policemen came to the farm and asked the farmer, "Are you hiding any Jews?" And we were 2 girls. And the farmer said, "Hiding Jews? I don't even know what they look like." And the farmer offered him a glass of wine, and he said, and we were trembling in our hiding place when we heard that. How long is it going to take? Remember, we stand in a hiding place. We cannot move, we cannot sneeze, we cannot cough, we cannot shift our weight, because you can hear it. And the gendarme refused, and he left. So, one more time we were safe. Let me tell you that the Jewish resistance, the Catholic and Protestant organizations, the Quakers, many, many thousands of people resisted the Germans, saved children, probably quite a few thousand children, by doing everything they could to save them. I just read the story of a young girl, 18 years old, Marianne Krohn. She was born in Germany and found herself in France during the war. She joined the underground, the resistance. She was taking 28 children to the Swiss border. Remember, Switzerland is a neutral country. She was caught with the 28 children 200 meters short of the French-Swiss border, outside a town called Annemasse. She was arrested. She and the children were taken to jail. She was tortured. She revealed nothing. She had a chance at escaping. She refused. She was not going to abandon the children. Eventually, after Annemasse in that area of France was liberated in 1944, her nearly nude body was found. You all know what happened to her. Doesn't have to be said. They were brave people, Christian and Jews alike, who opposed whatever they could to help people. By the way, young people were also, and adults were taken not only to Switzerland, and the Schomburg sent a lot of people over to Switzerland with false identification papers. And whatever it took to get the people across the border, not only to Switzerland, but also to Spain, over the Pyrenees. And the Pyrenees are formidable mountains, not easy to get across. They spent then some time in jail, and then, like all illegals in Europe, you cross the border illegally, you spend time in jail. Many of the young people who went to Spain later on went to North Africa, and from North Africa to England, and joined the French army in England, and then came marching in with the Americans into France to liberate the north of France. So I and my friends were extremely lucky. We are among the luckiest that we are here. And we are here because there are good people in this world who were willing to help us. Thank you very much.